What's up, everybody? My name is Chris Martinez. I am the host of Operation Agency Freedom. And of course, in my day job, I am also the CEO and founder of Bloom, where we work with marketing agencies and provide management consulting and technology to increase profit, maximize your agency's value, unlock your potential, and help you achieve an 8-figure exit. Today, I have got from Portland, Oregon, Rocky Pedden. I knew I was going to mess up that name. Rocky Pedden with Revenue Zen. He is a self-described president of the company. He's a dad. He's an outdoorsman, a home improver, and a dog lover, much like myself. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I know that you're a very busy guy, and I appreciate you being on the show and taking time out to talk to our audience.
Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, great to be. Thanks for having me on, Chris. I appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to chatting.
Perfect. So we're going to be talking all about SOPs and processes, which I know that you mentioned you are passionate about, which honestly it's a little bit rare, but I'm also obsessed with SOPs and processes, and I know that that's changed my business and my life. But before we get into that, I do, of course, want to talk a little bit about your story and how you got started. I know you spent a little bit of time down here in Southern California as well. So kind of give us your, let's do like a 2-minute biography as to how you got in this crazy world of running a marketing agency.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a classic, more of like a situation of more of who you know as opposed to what you know. And so initially out of school, I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I was a basketball player at Cal Lutheran, and they hired a lot of athletes, like student athletes. And, it was a great place, a lot of experience. And from there, that's actually where I met my wife as well. And from there, I moved into sales, working for like tech companies. That's where I met my business partner, Alex Boyd. He actually hired me onto the sales team at Indeniro. And at some point, we both left Indeniro, but we stayed in touch. He started Revenue Zen, and we would grab a beer together every month or so and just kind of chat business. And we would, we were quite a bit younger. This is like 10 years ago. And so, we didn't know what we know today. And it was a lot of like new experiences. So I was always curious, like what was going on in his life with running his own company. And then at some point, he actually asked me to join Revenue Zen. And I actually turned him down the first time because my wife was like due with our first son, like a week later. And I was like, I can't do it right now.
Right.
And then the guy he did hire, who I know him as well, just wasn't the right fit for him. And he ended up leaving about 6 months later. And then Alex reached out again, and I was like, yes, let's do it. And so I jumped in initially to be on the sales side, in sales and customer success and all that good stuff. And then gradually, like when I first got in there, we just realized we just didn't have operations set up. And so I moved into more of an operations role. We didn't have a project management tool set up. So I built a project management tool and gradually just started taking on more and more of those responsibilities. And as Alex, the CEO founder, wanted to move out of those like compliance issues and operations and HR, he just started adding more of that into my plate. And then eventually, I just moved into the president role, and Alex is still involved with the company, but more on like being the face of the company on LinkedIn and social presences, things of that nature. And I just kept on taking on more and more of like the daily responsibilities and finance responsibilities for the business. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey. It's I've learned a ton. I'm happy to looking forward to sharing a lot of the things that I've learned over the last 5 years of doing this to help other agency owners hopefully find some peace of mind and not fall into some of the same traps that we did.
Perfect. Yeah. So Mike, well, first of all, I find it fascinating that you went in at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, because I know people that started there as well. And kind of like, if you didn't have an entryway into, back when I graduated college, which was 2003, the big thing was to get into pharmaceutical sales. Like everybody wanted to be in pharmaceutical sales. Unless you had some crazy connection, you would usually go work for a company like Ricoh Copiers or like some copy company or Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Or me, I went and worked at Pitney Bowes, which did postage machines way back in the day. And then people would get their experience and then move on to something else. So it's just hilarious that you work for Enterprise. Now, before you got to the agency, did you have any other agency experience, or were you kind of going in cold?
I had some other contextual experience that was helpful. So I worked for I think at the time, they were the largest publishing company in North America in the healthcare industry.
Okay.
And so I had worked there in sales, and I would sell marketing programs to, mostly like SaaS level or technology companies that were selling technology to like doctors' offices. And so I had some, like I said, contextual knowledge around obviously marketing and
Yeah.
systems and things of that nature, but I'd never worked directly inside of an agency. But I'd also sold some programs to agencies as well. So
Got it.
some exposure, but like nothing directly, I would say.
And how long was Revenue Zen around for when you came into the company?
About 2.5 years. I started in
Okay.
July of 2019, and Alex first started operations in early 2017. So
Okay.
yeah, and we've gone through like a pretty big transformation. Like initially we were more of like an SDR,
Yeah.
outsourced, part-time SDRs for companies.
Uh-huh.
And over time we just like made the pivot into really focusing on the SEO side of things and content strategy and things of that nature.
Okay, so let's dive into that because
Yeah.
so you come in, company's about 2.5 years old. The first 2 years are really, really difficult, but still the company is pretty young. Like you're still
Mhm.
getting your feet wet by many standards. You come in on the sales side. What was there a moment or something that was going on in the business where you both recognized, you and Alex, your partner, both recognized, hey, we need a lot of help on the operations? Because usually I find that there's some trigger, right? There's some trigger moment. What did that happen with you guys?
Yeah, and in total there were four partners at the time,
That's a lot.
and one of the partners was overseeing. Alex and Darren were kind of more on the sales side, and
Mm-hmm.
then Fitz and the team oversaw kind of more of the marketing content side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came in, I was supposed to oversee like client success and client upsells and continued revenue.
Yep.
And like the moment for me was, I went to the team and I was like, hey, how many like what's our quota for this month for these things? And at that point in time, we were still doing SDR work, but we were also starting to move into content and like SEO work.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked like, hey, how many pieces of content are we going to be writing this month? And I was just thinking like, I want to know like what that looks like. I want to
Mm-hmm.
know like what our capacity is and things of that nature. If I'm going to be selling these things and if I'm going to be like responsible for making sure that our clients are satisfied with what we're delivering, like that's important information.
Yes.
And that didn't live anywhere. And I was like, no one could tell me like how many pieces of content we were going to write. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, well, we need to build a system where we can track all this. And if we didn't know what we were writing, then we also didn't know like the cost associated with each of those pieces of content. And so it was kind of at the end of the month, we would get our financials. And one thing about Alex is like he's really, really savvy with Excel. And we have a really, really well built out pro forma where we track all
Love
of
it.
our business operations. And like when our accounting team tells us something, like I can go to our pro forma and be like, no, you guys missed something because this is the source of truth. And like,
I
anyways,
love it. I love it.
yeah. Yeah, like
Yes.
we're really like big on that. And so yeah, like, as I was looking at that, I was just we need to have a project management solution. So the first thing I did like a day of research and I looked at Asana and ClickUp and Airtable and all this other stuff. And I ended up just using Airtable, built like V1 and just started wrapping my hands around all the things we were responsible for. And
Mm-hmm.
pretty immediately we realized like, oh, we're kind of behind on quota for some of our clients. And in some cases, we were behind by a lot. And I immediately was like, well, that's a risk because we've recognized revenue for a lot of this, but we haven't recognized expenses for a lot of this because we haven't had a writer actually write the content necessarily.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like that potentially puts your P&L in jeopardy of like looking really not great and
Yeah.
having kind of like these dips and valleys and mountains. And that doesn't really represent the business very well. And so it took a few months, but we got that under control. But that was really the moment was just not having anything in place. And I was like, we need to have this. And everybody was like, yep, we agree. That's what you should focus on. And so, yeah, that was kind of day one.
They're like, here you go, Rocky. Here's your next
Yeah.
project. See what you got
Yeah.
yourself into. It's interesting that, well, let me ask you, did nobody recognize that that was a problem, or did other people see that there was a problem? They just didn't want to take on the task of fixing it.
I think it was just like other people like Alex and Darren were so focused on sales. Cause like,
Yeah.
when you start a new business, you're young, like you got to hustle.
Yes.
And that's what Alex and Darren were doing. They were hustling, they were bringing in deals, they were delivering a lot of those deals themselves. They were really involved in the day to day of that side of the business. And I think it was really more of like, we didn't know what we didn't know until
Mm-hmm.
someone like pointed it out and was like,
Yeah.
we should have this. And then everybody was like, that's kind of stupid. We really should have. It's kind of dumb that we don't have that already.
Right.
And
Right.
so, yeah, I don't think it was necessarily like a lack of, them not being good at their jobs or anything along those lines. It was more just like kind of like the evolution of the business. It just necessitated it at that point in time, and it really hadn't before.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you guys definitely had that was way ahead of the curve is the pro forma, because that's
Yeah.
like one of the things that we do for our clients. We've got, agencies that are doing multi seven figures and they've never even heard of that before. They don't have budgets,
Oh man.
never had sales quotas or anything like that either. But yeah, that's awesome that you were able to go in there and tackle those problems. So let's walk through. So you recognize, hey, we've got to be able to make sure that we're delivering these assets to the clients and not what's the word that I'm looking at, not thinking that our profitability is better than it actually is. Walk us through that first maybe 6 months to a year. What are the things that you start to implement? And I asked you this question because there's somebody that's listening right now and they're like, holy crap, I got to do all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back. I remember kind of pulling back to enterprise here real quick. One of my managers at enterprise, because at enterprise, they really do. I mean, it's in the movie Step Brothers. They do teach you to be your own boss, and they really are grounded in like the accounting literacy when you're running your own branch for enterprise. And one of my bosses there would always say when I was in that training program, he'd be like, "Hey, you can't track what you don't measure." And it's like a well-known phrase,
Yep.
but it's super true, right? Like if you don't have the systems and ability to track, then you're just kind of flying blind. You're kind of flying like you're in a cowboy. You're shooting from the hip. You're closing deals. You're kind of running the business off gut instinct and gut feel. And that really works really well up to about $1 million. And then you hit like this glass ceiling at $1 million where you can't break through. And the reason you can't break through is because like you don't have the functionality to be able to plan and forecast and really understand where your expenses are. Like, are you controlling contractor expenses? Well, I don't know if I am or not because I'm not tracking that stuff. And I'm certainly not tracking it like proactively. It might be reactively in some cases. So
Right.
yeah, those first 6 months I would say was just essentially putting all of that information, all that data into an Airtable and organizing it by our service offering and how we were delivering things, getting the whole team to adopt and use it, which the team was pretty small at the time, so it was not very difficult to do. And just building out, like that's where the SOP creation started, like writing everything down so that the next person we hired, they had the tools and the ability to just read that document and be able to implement it without having to ask a ton of questions or not do it properly or whatever the case may be. And so that was the first, I would say, 6 months. And at that point in time, I kind of hit a wall with Airtable. And at the time, Airtable just didn't have the functionality that I was looking for. It's a great tool for what it is, but we ended up transitioning everything over to ClickUp. And ClickUp is just a huge sandbox for what you can do. You can use it as a CRM.
Yep.
You can use it for project management. You can use it for SOP. You can use it for, our comp plan for our team, for example, was based off managed revenue. So everybody on our team who's a strategist on the SEO side, they have a base salary, but then it's kind of like a sales plan where they also get a commission essentially based on the revenue that they manage of their clients. And so it kind of gets them skin in the game for the agency success. And I track all of that information inside of ClickUp, excuse me, which is kind of funny because like we'll look at when I'm working with business coaches or, if I'm in like an exec group or something like that, we talk about our pro formas, and I would say like I'm really proud of our pro forma. I've contributed to it. Alex is certainly the mastermind behind it. He created it, but everybody looks at that pro forma and they're like, "Wow, that's crazy." And I pull up my ClickUp instance and everything's in ClickUp, and they're like, "Wow, like that's really well built out." And so like our systems and operations, I think, are really really good, and it really came in handy. Like we got audited by the city of Portland. Last year because the city of Portland had like previously used to do this like really weird tax structure that no other jurisdiction in the country did. Fun. And one of the things that they were asking for was they were like, hey, how much revenue do your Portland employees manage? Because that's how they would allocate taxes. And our CPA was like, you probably don't have this information. And I was like, well, actually, I have everything that they are asking for. And it came in super handy. I just like copy and pasted and wrote out an explanation. And our CPA was like, wow, like I'm shocked that you have this information in such detail. And I was like, well, this is how my team gets paid. So like really important for me to track. And over time, like we've just built out like a lot of sales agencies or sales, cultures will say like, if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist, or it's not in HubSpot, it doesn't exist. And I take that same approach with ClickUp. Anything that's important for account management perspective, when we should invoice people when they go into either like the initial onboarding kickoff call or the recurring growth kickoff call. Like there needs to be like tasks associated so that I get notified for when I need to send the invoice out and so on and so forth. So ClickUp gives you all that functionality where you can assign things to other people. You can have the meaningful conversations inside the task. It doesn't get lost in Slack. That's one of the main issues I have with Slack, where like a conversation could take all day. Right. You can miss it, and then it just gets buried. You don't have that situation with ClickUp. So that might have been a little bit more.
No, this is all amazing. Yeah, so I will say, if there's an agency owner listening to this right now, find you a Rocky. Just if you recognize that you do not have the capacity to do this on your own, find yourself a Rocky, because he's the type of person that's going to come in and literally solve all these problems. You might get some job offers out of this, by the way. So one question that I have is on the time tracking side. So you guys are doing time tracking with employees?
We don't do any time tracking. And
interesting.
So we set up our contracts with our clients to be very specific. So there's no retainer. It's you're going to get X number of blog posts, X number of backlinks. We're going to do these specific deliverables. And our pricing for each of those things is dictated by how much time on average those things take for us to do. Right. And so in the early days of Airtable, like that was one of the things I was asking the team constantly. It was like, hey, how long is it taking you to do this? And how long is it taking you to do that? And then I would take that information and be like, all right, well, how much is their time worth? And that's how we essentially got our pricing table set up, right? It's pretty standard, pretty simple. And then when we made the acquisition, Revenues then acquired a really small SEO agency called Doorbell Digital. And the CEO, the owner of that company, Ken Marshall, joined on the executive team, and he is a brilliant SEO. He's just a brilliant person in general. He's wicked smart, and he really took us to the next level when it came to how we delivered SEO service, how we thought about SEO, how we delivered content. And over the last several years of working with him, we've taken our SOPs even further and built more efficiency, which when you build efficiency as an agency owner, you're essentially just dropping dollars into your bottom line. You're just improving that bottom line number. And so that's what we've really been focusing on. I would say one of the key metrics that I focus on as well is revenue managed per employee. And I know that was like a big thing I can't remember what big tech company used to track that. But for us, like that's my measuring stick. And so when I started at Revenues In, we were about $9,000 to $12,000 a month in revenue per employee. Okay. And now we're pushing like 25-ish K per month per employee. And we've gotten to the point where, like when I tell the team, I was like, when they would have a month of managing 20K a month, 2 years ago, they're like, man, that was crazy. That's like, we are never going to be able to break past 25K. And then back then I told them, I was like, there will be a time when you guys do 50K a month in your sleep, because we're just going to keep building efficiency. Yeah. And they're like, no way. And then sure enough, this year we had somebody on our team, they actually managed $60,000 a month in revenue. And part of that is like swimming upstream to larger clients. Yeah. Bigger, bigger deal sizes. And part of that is, but I would say like the biggest part of that is just building efficiency, mostly through SOPs.
So that's amazing. When you're talking about the employee that's managing 25,000, what is their position? Are they account manager or?
Yeah. So we kind of blend our the account manager role and the SEO strategist role together. We have it under one person does both those roles, and they have those responsibilities. And we're actually looking at, when I think about Revenues In and where we're going next, I think that we'll probably move into more of like being like a revenue agency. And what I mean by that is just helping our clients understand like where their revenue is coming from. So not just looking at marketing KPIs, and we always try to get like to the source of truth for like pipeline creation and deals closed and things of that nature. But eventually I envision us helping our customers understand like how they should be spending money. Like, how do you set up your reporting in HubSpot? Like, how do you do your lead attribution? Like, those things are really, really important. And most people don't do it. And like when we ask for those reports, like they're like, it's this report, but like it's not very accurate. We also use this Google sheet, and we also have this other thing that we're looking at, and we kind of blend these together. And there's also some like level of gut instinct involved. And don't get me wrong, I think gut instinct is great, but when it comes to running a business, like I don't want to use my gut. I want to use like actual factual numbers.
You're literally doing a promotion right now for my new book, which is called Facts, Not Feelings.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if I can pull it up right now just so you can see. By the time this goes live, people will have already seen the book. Where is I think I just have the mock-up right here of the landing page. So give me 1 second. This is hilarious. So this is how you know that the show is not scripted, because I had no idea that they was going to be talking about this. So my new book is called Facts, Not Feelings, Mastering the Art of Running Your Business Based on Data and Not Emotions.
Yes.
It's
1000%.
I'm going to ask you for an endorsement or something.
Send me a copy.
I will absolutely
review.
send you a copy. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
no, but I love that. Keep going.
Yeah, I just think, like when it comes to those things, you just have to have that data, that information to really be able to make informed decisions about your business. And the way I looked at my business is not only is it my livelihood, but it's also my responsibility to not only myself and my family, but then also to my employees and my employees' families. And having a stability factor for revenues in is just crazy important to me. And I've had testimonials from my one-on-ones with my team. I do skip levels with everybody on my team still, because we're still pretty small. And I've had people tell me how appreciative they are of how transparent we are with how we operate, and also just how we do business. So yeah, I think that's kind of wraps up that thought, but yeah, happy to dive in deeper if there's
this is amazing.
Unfortunately,
we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to ask you the future. So it sounds like obviously, you're an amazing president and you have a really, really solid understanding of the business. I would say more so than 90% of the people that I meet that run agencies, and even the people that I have on the podcast. What are your guys' plans? Because I'm guessing you have it all mapped out on your pro forma as to where you guys are going. Where do you see the evolution of the agency going? And I have a caveat for you. Given the impact that AI has had specifically around content marketing, and I think SEO is going to be impacted in the long term as well. How are you guys factoring that into your plans moving forward?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, at the end of 2023, we were actually acquired. And so,
oh, wow.
So Onfolio Holdings is our parent company. Myself and Ken and Alex, we still each have equity and revenues in as well. So we're still owners, we're still involved. I'm not planning on going anywhere. But it does change the landscape a little bit in terms of opportunity, because Onfolio has other agencies in their umbrella. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for revenues then to continue to carry the torch within the Onfolio brands of businesses. And I'm looking forward to that. In terms of the industry at large and how I'm thinking about that, and this is something that, Ken and I talk about quite a bit, because he really is the SEO subject matter expert. Right. And I think what we envision there is a lot of people think that AI is going to totally take over. And I think to a certain extent, for certain aspects, it will, without a doubt.
Right.
At a minimum, it's going to accelerate how quickly you can do things. And I think it's going to depend on where each individual business is at in their marketing growth curve. And so if it's a brand new business and you just have a new website, one of the things you got to do is as quickly as you can get 100 pieces of content up on your website. And does that content need to be perfect? No, but you're writing for two audiences, right? You're writing for your audience of prospects and future customers, and then you're writing for the audience of Google and what Google cares about. And Google still is saying that they are not looking the same at human generated content as AI generated content. You can tell the difference in when AI is used and when it's not used. At some point, AI is going to get so good that will be a null statement.
You can't tell the difference. Yeah, you won't be able to tell the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even it will. And the other point to that is who cares who wrote it? If the content is useful and it helps the people who are using that content, then it's serving the purpose that it was designed for, whether it was written by a human or by a robot. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
And so I still think that for the next several years, content I think can potentially accelerate, but you're really going to need to have a human element for editing and reviewing that content, making sure it's hitting on all the key points that you want it to hit on. I think consumers are becoming more and more intelligent. And so when it comes to how people are purchasing things, especially in the B2B world, you're not going to get them on a cold email outbound campaign as nearly as frequently as you would 10 years ago. It's going to be a full ecosystem that you're going to need to have, a social presence on LinkedIn, a company presence on LinkedIn, really good content, a ton of case studies showing how your product or your service has helped other people in similar positions. It's going to be more of that holistic view, I think, than necessarily just content or just outbound, those two, like the marketing and sales teams, really are going to have to be married together and really working together more so than I think ever before in the past. I think a lot of companies still have like a firewall between those teams, and they have pointed almost in different directions. And I think those companies are really going to suffer. And when I think about our own personal strategy for revenues, in like my sales team and my marketing team, they are working together and they are tackling problems together. They're solving, issues, as a team as opposed to separately, and they share the same budget. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I feel like you are inside of my brain, because everything that you just talked about, I think about as well. And I'm not even an SEO guy, but definitely agree with you on the convergence of marketing and sales for sure. I've been saying that for months. I think we're right. I really do think that we're going to be right. So awesome.
Yeah, I think it has to go that way. I can't envision any other route, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll see, obviously, but
You know what else? This is kind of just a side note. So, we've grown up and we learned the scientific method growing up. And this was like a revolutionary concept that I just read about recently. How now, with all the access that we have to data, that we don't need the scientific method anymore. We don't need to create a hypothesis and test it and then prove it. It is fascinating for me, because from an ads perspective or a lead generation perspective, that's kind of what we do. We put out content, we run ads, we analyze the data, we make tweaks until we get the magic formula, until we can get our cost per lead or whatever. And then we run that until it stops working, and then go through the process again. It is very, very interesting to think about this new model where essentially we have computers that learn so fast and we have access to so much data that maybe we don't even need to test anymore. Maybe they'll just know, that would be fascinating.
I mean, that's like the whole idea behind like those language learning models. It's when you're talking about AI generated content, the AI isn't, in most cases, like ChatGPT, for example, it's not that it understands what it's writing. It just understands like what most likely is to come after this word.
Right.
And that's how it builds, right? And so if it knows, it can take this plethora of data for ads, which there's obviously just terabytes of that data just floating around out there. And it can analyze that in half a second and then come up with an algorithm based off of like whatever your inputs are, right? For like ICP, budget, industry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it just like spits out, here's the curve. And that just is constantly updated and it's being managed by an AI. Like that's where I think AI really is going to take off. It's just like essentially being a data miner and compounding that data into useful tidbits that it then influences the system with. Yeah, no doubt. I think AI has a huge role in that, and eventually in building content too. And there are some guys out there. My wife actually works for an AI company, and their model is based off of, it was initially designed as a translation model. And so their model is more context driven than it is like just predictive driven. And so there are going to be different types of AI for writing that come out that I think will have a different impact on like how it's perceived by the buyer in terms of the quality of that writing. So we'll see about that too. But yeah.
Fascinating stuff. Rocky, thank you so much for being on today. Really appreciate it. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way they could get in contact with you? I think you might have also had an offer in there that you wanted to talk about too.
Oh yeah, my email is just rocky@revenuezen.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn too. There's not very many Rocky Peddens out there. Just Portland, Oregon. And yeah, I'm happy to provide any type of discount. 10% is like more than easy for me to do. And then I think, another big way obviously businesses build is just referrals. So if anybody wants to be a referral partner, other agencies, we're building that network. We have that network in place as well. So happy to, chat about that as well with anybody.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right, Rocky. Well, thank you so much for being on today. For all of our listeners, definitely hit him up. This is a very, very smart guy in the space, not just from a technology standpoint, but also just knowing how to run an agency. So fantastic interview. All right. Take care, Rocky. Have a great one.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Hey, thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you subscribe to the podcast and also share it with friends, family, and basically who will find the same value in this episode as you do. So to get the latest from me, then let's connect on social media on the Facebooks at facebook.com or Instagram. Then you can also find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and even TikTok. Yes, I'm that cool. We are on TikTok. final site where you can see all of our other episodes of Operation Agency Freedom, register for live trainings on how to really profitable agency, and you can see exactly how we help marketing agencies fix their operations and scale to 8 figures and beyond. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.